All right. Hey, good morning, folks. Once again, we are back. Today is Wednesday, September 28th, 2022, and we are tracking the imminent landfall of major Hurricane Ian this morning. Unfortunately, it's a very sober morning and a morning we've seen far too often in the last 3 or 4 years as we once again are witnessing a monstrous Category 4 or potentially Category 5 hurricane bearing down on a section of the U.S. coastline. We've seen this from Michael in 2018. uh, Dorian in 2019 was in the Bahamas, but it was an equally just devastating sort of hurricane. 2020 with Hurricane Laura, 2021 with Hurricane Ida, and yet again we're going to have another ice storm crossed off the list as Hurricane Ian bears down on the southwest coast of Florida at potentially Category 5 hurricane intensity. It is something that once again is just a gut churning, just just a terrible thing to watch unfold. And folks down there near Cape Coral, Port Charlotte, Fort Myers, and even up into like Englewood and so need to be ready because this is about to be the ride of their lives and potentially one of the all-timers in U.S. hurricane history makes landfall in a few hours this morning. So let's go ahead and look at the latest from the National Hurricane Center. As of 8 a.m., the maximum storm winds have increased to 155 mile an hour officially. That is the end of Category 4. 156 and above is Category 5. But since we only do 5 mile an hour increments, we'd have to be to 160 to get into that Category 5 club. The movement is north-northeast at 10 miles an hour, and it is now beginning to bend back towards the coast of the landfall. Expected sometime in the next about 4 to 6 hours, roughly, recording this after 9 a.m. Eastern time. So probably by early afternoon, Ian's northern eye wall will be moving ashore. This is the Tampa Bay Radar this morning, and we can see why Ian is such an unbelievably powerful hurricane. We see a nearly complete ring of deep convection around that eye wall. Only this one little section here is not really fully lit up, but the returns are 55 to 60 dBz, which is just, it's incredible to see in a hurricane like this. That eye is also pretty clear. It's a little more cloud filled, but the radar shows the structure is very healthy, and there's a lot of heavy weather coming in onshore with Ian. Both heavier feeder bands out ahead of the storm are producing tornadoes this morning. There's actually a bit of a dry air streak across South Florida because there is some dry air wrapping around Ian. So the rainfall threat for southeast Florida is actually the not as bad as the rainfall threat that's coming for North Florida, Central Florida, and then of course near where Ian is making landfall. But this is an outrageously powerful hurricane. One of the reasons that Ian may be intensifying, like we have seen this morning, is we had talked about the potential for wind shear and drier air to get in, and some drier air is trying to get in, but dry air by itself with a system like Ian can't help much. You've got to have some forcing mechanism to get it into a hurricane this large and powerful. And this is an outrageously powerful hurricane, and these things kind of do their own thing until they just can't anymore. We have a little bit of wind shear coming across from the subtropical jet across the Gulf of Mexico, but it's not very strong yet. Yeah, the backside of the storm is flattened out a little bit for sure. You can see these clouds quickly race off and away, indicating there's some upper level flow out of the southwest on the storm, but it's not that strong yet. And the other problem we have is the interaction with a jet streak. So this is something we don't see a lot. We have this broad upper trough here this morning, and we have Ian to the south, and they're interacting with each other. That's what's pulling Ian across the Florida Peninsula, and is what's going to pinwheel it up into the southeast coast over the next couple of days. But we have this jet streak aloft this morning in the dry air slot, analyzing water vapor imagery right about here. This is probably the penultimate proximity of this jet streak to Ian. I'm just kind of theorizing here, but this is probably supercharging the storm. It's pulling all this air away from the storm, and it's artificially increasing the outflow capability of Ian. What that basically means is it's exhausting the storm even better. And by exhausting, I mean the mechanism like your car's exhaust would work, not like tiring the storm, but instead it's like letting the storm breathe in the upper levels, and it's probably supercharging it. Now, if this got any closer, it would begin to impart a tremendous amount of wind shear, and Ian would begin to weaken. That's kind of what we expect over the next couple of days. But unfortunately, Ian hit the patch of deepest, warmest water it could find right before landfall, right here in the southwest Gulf of Mexico, or southeast Gulf of Mexico, rather, and it interacted with this jet streak at almost a perfect time. There's not a ton of case study for this. There was a cyclone in Bangladesh that did this, and they have a remarkably similar sort of satellite presentation, and this is this is where the science just has to come further, and we don't always fully know how these interactions are going to play out. So the early guess of why I think Ian has intensified beyond the current expectation. Again, the Hurricane Center had it peaked around 130 miles an hour, which made good sense. Ian had done an eye wall replacement last night. It was a larger storm. Larger storms typically have a harder time spinning themselves back up. There's just more physics at work, and that drier arid shear was supposed to start picking up, which figured that would probably tip the balance with the warm water, and it would kind of balance it out, and Ian would landfall right around that Cat 3, Cat 4 intensity. However, Ian has blown past those expectations, and once again, we see a major hurricane making a run for it all the way up to landfall. This is the Hurricane Hunters data from earlier this morning. This was the pass that really got everybody buzzing. The spike right here, the flight level winds corresponding to almost 150 knots above the surface. That's like 170 something miles an hour. 175, I think, is the translation to miles per hour. And the central pressure was in the mid 930s. We've actually seen pressure falling below that to the low 930s. The pressure is dropping almost a millibar, more than a millibar per hour at this point, which is an astounding pressure fall. And this is the SFMR wind instrument reading. The SFMR is a step frequency microwave radiometer, I think is what it stands for. And it essentially scans the surface of the ocean to determine wind speeds based off of how the ocean is responding to the winds. It's pretty high-tech stuff, and you can see two spikes here near 135 knots, which would be well into Category 5. That would be Category 5. That would translate to 160 miles per hour. Now, there is some debate about SFMR readings in intense hurricanes. They think that the ocean spray and the foam can almost disrupt the instrument. It can make it become a little more unreliable. So we typically would look for flight level winds more than SFMR winds with an intense hurricane. There's some other more big brain science things we have to look at. But this was those are the passes that got it started. And then there was another. That was the second spike there. And there's been two more spikes as the hurricane hunters are penetrating the eye wall of Ian, where the wind readings are about 150 knots. So it's unclear if the Hurricane Center is going to upgrade this at 11 a.m. They have never upgraded a hurricane to Category 5 at landfall. They've all been post-storm analysis. Even Michael was thought to be at 155, and then they pushed it to 160. Andrew was reclassified years after it made landfall, and Camille and Labor Day were the other two Category 5s that hit the U.S. coast. And those were upgraded, once we started going back and looking at the storms in detail. So it's unclear if we're going to call this Category 5 today, but whether it like I've said too many times over the last couple of years, whether it hits as a top end 4 or a 5, it does not matter. This is a catastrophic hurricane. This is catastrophic in every sense of the word. I know it's a tired phrase. We use it too much, but we have too many opportunities to use it. The water rise and the damage coming for Southwest Florida is going to be life-altering for generations or more to come. This is going to be Hurricane Charley on steroids times 2.5. I mean, this is Hurricane Charley if you more than double the size of Hurricane Charley. That is what folks down there can expect. And the coastline will be recognizable for the last time for a long time in this area. So let's go ahead and talk impacts in the broad brush, then we'll talk a little bit of Northeast Florida. This is we'll just go by the details. This is the morning storm surge forecast. You can see this has come up as I talked about this week. As I kept telling y'all, 10 feet, but there could be more than 10 feet. And this is what's finally being realized: 12 to 16 feet for where the that right front eye wall of Ian is going to come ashore. Again, the landfall is going to be something like this. So right off to the right where that eye makes landfall: Charlotte Harbor, Bonita Beach, Cape Coral, 16 feet of water rise. That surge can push 5 to 10 miles inland in the right conditions. And that is 16 feet of water rise above your head, above normally high tide, standing at the beach. So imagine 3 people standing on top of each other's shoulders, of average height at the beach, and that's how high the water could be when it comes in. It's going to come in ferociously. It's going to come in relentlessly, and it is the deadliest aspect of these storms by a mile. Anyone left there, please implore you to get to higher ground. If you're not leaving, you're staying in a 2 or 3 story place, have a way to get to higher ground, and have a way to get an axe, a chainsaw, or something to get out of your roof if you have to. It's that serious. This is life or death we're talking about this morning when we talk about the storm surge threat that is coming for the Southwest Florida coastline. 6 to 10 foot all the way up to about Tampa Bay. Again, the storm's southerly track did save Tampa Bay. Now we're expecting about 4 to 6 feet. Their winds will be more offshore than onshore, so there will be some water rise. 6 foot of water rise is obviously no joke, but Tampa Bay was spared this, because if this was going to Tampa Bay, it would be one of the worst hurricanes, if not the worst hurricane in United States history, save maybe Katrina and Harvey. I mean, it would be that bad, but it's still going to be one of the worst hurricanes in U.S. history. It's just Tampa Bay Metro did get very lucky in this one. Rainfall totals to come are pretty prolific. Ian's speed picking up a little bit has brought the apocalyptic 2 foot plus totals down some. The Weather Prediction Center's latest forecast is still for some isolated pockets near 20 inches. That's definitely very possible. Um, as you can see, the heaviest axis of rainfall actually shifts more into north or central eastern Florida, and even up towards like Jacksonville and back towards Orlando, where the heaviest rainfall is going to occur in this sort of swath as those onshore winds feed out ahead of Ian and enhancing the rainfall tonight through early tomorrow, and then the actual bands of Ian show up. So you're going to see a lot of rainfall from that, but generally 10 to 15 inches of rain is a good broad brush, and there will be pockets of 20, 22, probably some isolated amounts near 2 feet. But the ridiculous 30, 40 plus inches are probably mostly off the table. I would keep a close eye out just south of Tampa Bay, where that northern quadrant is coming ashore. That could be some really heavy rain as well. But that's certainly the rainfall forecast. This will be a massive freshwater flooding event. Rivers will approach moderate to major flood stage across the state, and the soils are already fairly saturated. Drainage areas are already fairly full. Please pay attention to flooding. If you're in a flood-prone area, you need to get to higher ground. Even if you're well away from the storm and are not expecting hurricane-type winds, the flooding is going to be the biggest problem with Ian, and it is going to be prolific in places. This is the wind gust forecast. Geez. For Ian, you can see the European model expecting wind gusts. I mean, 140, 130 is wishful thinking. It could be 150, 160, 170. I mean, it's going to be catastrophic. There is going to be total structural failure in some of these places where that eye wall comes ashore. What Hurricane Michael did in, Panama City. In Mexico Beach in Florida, what Hurricane Andrew did in Homestead. That's what we're going to witness with Hurricane Ian this morning. So every preparation needs to be done, but you can see how far inland those hurricane force winds spread well into central Florida. Wind gusts well over 100 miles an hour are possible, and at least well above 75 miles an hour. And then even up into northern Florida, you can see the beaches of northern Florida, are going to experience those wind gusts, 75, 85, miles per hour as Ian cuts across the state and moves up around you. National Digital Forecast Database also showing the wind gust potential. You can see how this swath of wind cuts through central Florida. This is going to be the worst storm they've taken. This will be worse than Hurricane Charley for a lot of folks. This is taking a similar track to Charley, so it's a lot of the same areas that got hit by Charley in 2004. This will be worse than Charley. So if you're thinking, oh, well, Charley, wasn't that bad or whatever, this is going to be just as bad or worse for your area, because Ian is a stronger storm than Charley, most likely, and it's a bigger storm than Charley, as we talked about. Storm Prediction Center showing tornado probabilities here this morning. The highest tornado probability is actually on the central east coast of Florida, around like the Space Coast and points north and south, but a 5% tornado risk for much of the Florida Peninsula. Looks like northern Florida, northeast Florida probably stays out of the tornado potential today, but they'll get in on it tomorrow. The day 2 outlook tornado probabilities are also up, and you can see here the east coast of Florida probably is where those bands initially come on shore and begin to slow down due to friction. That's where the most forced rotation is. So, that's kind of like Flagler County, and I think like Volusia might be down there if my county maps are right. Daytona Beach, and again down to where the Space Coast is, that sort of region is probably your highest tornado risk. But pretty much across northern Florida, especially on the eastern side of northern Florida, you can expect the potential for tornadoes today and tomorrow. Friday, the tornado potential probably goes down considerably as the storm pivots up above you. You're looking at less of a tornado potential on the backside. The tornado potential will likely spread up into the Carolinas as, again, those bands move onshore and the friction slows them down. That creates the vorticity and the spin needed to generate the tornadoes. But it won't be as bad on Friday, but tomorrow and Thursday obviously are going to be pretty rough days across the Florida Peninsula. So that's what I got for you guys this morning on the broad update. We're going to talk Northeast Florida specifically now. Then we'll switch over to the satellite radar combo. Again, you can see Ian approaching, just an absolutely monstrous hurricane. Our area locally, we're seeing some first rain bands moving in. This is actually kind of forcing due to a cold front to our north, along with Ian's moisture surging from the south. This isn't directly related to Ian. Ian's most outer feeder bands are still moving into South Florida this morning, or at least the southern half of Florida, rather. So this is kind of a cold frontal forcing. This is going to feel more like a nor'easter today. It's going to be pretty cool outside, and it's going to be that kind of steady stratiform rain at times. It's going to be windy. The winds are going to pick up today, but the rainfall total should be, an inch or so. It's going to be fairly light rain for the most part, some heavier pockets, but the rainfall expected today is not expected to be anything like we're going to see tomorrow and Friday as Ian approaches overall. We'll take a look real quick at the potential timing of this. I want to time it out for you. This is the NAM-NEST high resolution model. This isn't the best tool to use because the NAM thinks it's going to come on shore a little bit more, but it'll illustrate the rough idea. So you can see here, this is a little bit later this morning. You can see this kind of band of heavier stratiform rain moving in this morning, causing, just kind of that nor'eastery type feel throughout the day and even into the evening hours. You can see some pockets of heavier showers start to move into our area later on Wednesday. But again, the wind gusts should stay below tropical storm strength. They're really added at the beach and below it inland. But as we go into Thursday morning, we'll go into about 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 Z. So it's about 7 a.m. local time. Thursday morning, you can see the heavier rain begins to spread into our area as Ian is crossing central Florida on the morning of Thursday. So this is a little less than 24 hours from now. These heavier feeder bands and lines are going to be marching on shore, and this is where that heavier weather is going to be expected. That's when this tropical storm force gusts are going to start. That's when this torrential downpours are going to start. And that continues throughout much of Thursday. And really, our worst weather will probably be sometime late on Thursday or Thursday evening. This is that kind of V notch we've been talking about. So you have the main band left of Ian converging with that cold frontal forcing to the north. There's a high pressure to the north that's helping forcing that pressure gradient down. And of course, you got the extremely low pressure of Ian wrapping in. So you've got this sort of, you see that kind of V shape that that feeder band makes. Or really, it's not a feeder band. It's kind of the core of the storm. That is where our strongest wind and rain will be. And there will probably be a period of time sometime late on Thursday, I'm going to anticipate, where the strongest winds of 65, 70 mile an hour wind gusts are going to be 80, 85 at the coast, and that torrential 2 to 3 inch per hour rainfall rates that are not going to cease for hours. So there are going to be times where the rainfall is just going to be ridiculous with the storm over our area, and I want to really make sure people are comprehending that it is going to start raining at some point, and it's just not going to stop. I mean, the rainfall totals are pretty spectacular for us. So let's go ahead and look at the latest from the National Weather Service in Jacksonville. We'll go back up to the main part of their briefing right here. This is at weather.gov. You put in your zip code or your area on the top left side, and you click at the top. There's a big briefing on Ian, and this is the PowerPoint slide you'll get. They update these every couple of hours. Wind gust forecast still to come here. Again, they think most of our area will be under the threat of wind gusts about 55 to 65 miles an hour. Some of the wind expectations have come down just a little bit inland, like further north and inland, because of the a little bit further offshore track that Ian may take. But generally, I'm going to tell most people, if you live on the western side of I-95, if you're on the western corridor of I-95 or out of the St. Johns River Basin itself, you can expect wind gusts likely 55 to 65 miles per hour. There will be a lot of them. They will be persistent. That's enough to cause power outages, knock down trees, etc., etc. But I think the hurricane force winds do stay away from our area. Now, if you go down towards Palm Coast, you get to the extreme south and east corner of our area. Yeah, you could be talking about some hurricane force wind gusts, no doubt. And I think at the immediate coast, something this graphic doesn't show is, on the east side of I-95, I still think there's a potential for some wind gusts above 80 miles an hour. So that's what I'm going to tell you. Storm surge threat still remains about 3 to 5 feet, I think up to 6 feet in some places. St. Johns River Basin, I would definitely lean towards that 6, 7 feet sort of water rise. It's going to be pretty high. It's going to be probably at this point something similar to what Hurricane Irma brought us. It's going to be a little bit of a different wind direction, though. The winds are going to be a little bit different than what Irma was, but not a ton. So I want to say that it's going to be close. Definitely going to be some water rise at the coast. And then, of course, at St. Johns River Basin, not only filling up with water from freshwater rainfall, but also the winds not letting the water escape from the basin is going to create a significant flooding situation. And they have us in their highest impact for flooding rainfall, extensive and potentially extreme flash flooding and river flooding. Your creeks and rivers are going to turn into violent rivers instead of just small streams. It's going to be very bad when this gets cranking. The rainfall totals for us are pretty high. This is the wind gust forecast, kind of what we've been talking about. And the rainfall totals here, the Weather Prediction Center's official forecast is about 10 to 15 inches of rain, a little closer to, 8 to 12 further out and west of town. But, there are going to be pockets that get over 15 inches of rain in our area. And that matches up fairly well with what the European model has. It's sort of the same picture. And then We also talk about the tornado potential. Again, this is the day 2 and day 3 outlooks from the Storm Prediction Center. Day 2 outlook here showing again the highest tornado probability is probably across southern St. John's and Flagler counties and then down towards Daytona Beach. But anywhere pretty much in northeast Florida, you can see the potential for a few isolated tornadoes in those feeder bands tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening. And then on Friday, that threat for tornadoes diminishes greatly. So really tomorrow is the day for tornadoes, not so much today nor on Friday. So that's kind of the latest I've got this morning for Northeast Florida and Hurricane Ian as a whole, guys. This is a significantly bad situation. It's only gotten worse over the last few hours. We'll see at 11 a.m. if the Hurricane Center is going to upgrade this to Category 5, but whether they do or whether they don't, this is a catastrophic hurricane. It is going to make parts of Southwest Florida unrecognizable in the long term. It is going to be a humanitarian disaster down there for weeks to come. Power is going to be out for weeks. There's going to be massive structural damage. It is going to be one of those hurricanes we look back and talk about for a very long time to come. So that's what I got for you guys this morning. We'll probably have one more update later this afternoon, and of course, we'll be posting all day on the Facebook page. So please check us out there. Stay safe, guys. Read and heed warnings, and if you're in Southwest Florida, get to higher ground. If you've got to get on a scooter and pedal it out there, I don't care. Just get away from the coast. It is going to be catastrophic down there. So that's what I got for you guys this morning. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching, and stay safe.